years, there was a very simple rule in Transformers. G1 characters win in generations, movie characters win in studio series. But for the 35th anniversary of the Transformers the movie, Hasbro decided to do a big celebration event that was in no way related to the fact that Generations was getting crowded with Beast Wars toys. But with this new subset of studio series came the chance to redo some Generations toys that weren't as well received. Thus, we get Studio Series 8617 Ironhide, the latest toy of a character who never seems to come out quite right. But maybe the fourth time's a charm. Ironhide's vehicle mode is based very heavily on his original Cherry Vignette mode, though there are some changes made, both to match the stylization of the animation model, and to avoid having to pay royalties to Nissan. We mainly see this in the form of lots of molded lines running down the length of the van, both on the sides and on the roof. They can get a bit broken up along the sides, but where they're visible, I think they add some subtle flair. Also, there are some smaller details that shine through very well, like the door handles, which are even oriented in different directions to match the real van. There are also these protrusions in front of the side windows that I think are trying to be rear-view mirrors. They're a little small, but points for including them at all. I've heard that some people don't care for the front end, but frankly, I don't understand it. It's not that different from the real Cherry Vignette, and where they did change things up, the shapes all still work together. I guess they went a bit heavy on the silver, but even that feels like a reach. The rear is pretty well detailed too. The taillights are molded in, as well as a spot for the license plate, and a rear window that, I'll admit, is a little bit small. I can see why they made it this size so that it wouldn't interfere with the hinges, but it is kind of odd. I think it looks fine though. It helps that they added small details like the trunk handle, what looks like a tow hitch, and even a little badge on the bottom corner. Now, I will confess that the figure I'm showing you right now is slightly customized. In case you couldn't tell, the yellow stripes along the sides are stickers I made myself and aren't included out of the box. I do have some pictures prepared though, so you can see what he looks like without them, where you can see the outline of the stripe molded in, but it's all still in the base red color. And with these pictures, you can probably see why I chose to sticker them. The vehicle just looks so bland without them. Without it, the only colors you have to break up the red are the black and silver of the wheels, and the blue windshields that are too dark to really pop out the way the stripe does. The back end is also lacking in paint, but honestly that's to be expected. It's not like you're really going to be looking back there anyway. The biggest issue with the vehicle, though, is the way it's constructed. As I alluded to before, there are a lot of seam lines along the side of the vehicle that do break up a lot of the sculpting. And if that wasn't bad enough, there are two big hinges on either side that are kind of distracting. Both of these are sacrifices for the sake of the transformation, though, so I'm willing to forgive them even if they do look a bit awkward. And yes, the different plastics used don't perfectly color match. That's just a fact of toy engineering that we all have to live with. You can't use ABS for everything. Then again, maybe things would have been better if this figure didn't use so much clear plastic. Not only would that eliminate the paint matching issue, but it probably would have solved some durability concerns. For some reason, the clear plastic Hasbro uses doesn't seem to hold up as well under long-term stress compared to their opaque plastics. And sure enough, I'm already seeing small cracks popping up on the windows. It definitely doesn't bode well for the longevity of this vehicle mode, which is a major downer. On the plus side, you get a bit of weapon integration in this mode. There are two tabs on the roof for you to mount his pistols, so you can get some vehicle combat action. But if that's not your preference, there are also tabs on the underside so you can attach them as exhaust pipes. That is such a clever bit of weapon integration that you just don't see much on Transformers anymore. The van mode is 5 inches long and 2¼ inches tall. This makes him about as long as Siege Sideswipe, but well over twice as tall. So he's definitely a good bit bigger than a deluxe Autobot car, as you'd expect from a Voyager. Of course, Siege Optimus is a good inch longer and about a ½ inch taller, so he's still on the small side for a Voyager. So yeah, the vehicle mode has its flaws. But honestly, I think they're a little overhyped. When I'm just sitting around rolling this guy across my desk, I barely notice the color matching issues or the broken up side panels. The biggest issue really is the lack of the stripe. If they just found a way to work that in, I would say this was a pretty solid alternate mode. As is, it's admittedly a bit of a letdown. You're gonna want to brace yourself before transforming this toy because the connection between the windshield and the roof is really secure, which makes it a pain to transform both ways. It's especially daunting since so many clear plastic parts are involved. Once that's undone, a lot of the van mode ends up just panel forming away. The sides fold up on themselves and just hang off the robot legs, and the rear section folds up on itself to form the feet. I like the big swivel system that's used to get both the legs into position and move the bumper out of the way. The arms fold out simply enough, but getting them back into position for van mode can be a bit tricky. Also, make sure to fold up the little window bits when tucking everything into the chest cavity. It will not fit otherwise. Altogether, it's quite an involved transformation that really makes up for the figure's small size. You're probably starting to see why I was so lenient on the van mode now, aren't you? It took us almost 40 years, but we finally have a retail level Ironhide that represents the cartoon model. He's bulky, he's blocky, his torso is the right shape, everything is translated perfectly. But it also goes a step beyond the cartoon model, with lots of added tech detail across any surface that will allow it. Mainly the shoulders and the shins. And it's just that right amount of extra molding that makes him interesting to look at, without distracting from the more cartoony elements. Even the head sculpt is almost an exact replica of the cartoon design. It's a super basic design, of course, basically amounting to a robotic Spartan helmet with little ear roundels, but it's not often that's accurately captured in toy form. Most toys either make it too square, too angular, or too conical. Here, the shapes are all there, the only difference is, again, more panel lining. The face is also super characterful. It's a fairly blank expression, but it somehow still captures Ironhide's gruff persona. As surprising as it is that it took this long to get this figure, it's even more surprising that we didn't even get this head until now. But whatever the reason, I'm certainly glad we have it now. The biggest inaccuracies in this mode are just kibble. And I'm gonna be honest, the kibble management here is not great. The vehicle shells on the sides of his legs are only held in place by friction, and the bumper section on his back doesn't really have anywhere to go. I like to rest it like this, so it doesn't interfere with his silhouette, and for reasons we'll get to later. Hi, Phil of the Future here. Not that Phil of the Future, that's a different... Never mind. So, immediately after I finished recording this video, I noticed that the shell pieces on the legs do, in fact, tab in. It's a subtle connection, it's also very tight, and it also involves a clear plastic tab, so I'm also kind of concerned about that. But it does tab into place, so you don't have to just rely on friction for that, so just disregard anything I say about this going forward. Thanks. On the plus side, this figure feels very solid. Unlike the vehicle mode, very few integral pieces are made of clear plastic, so I don't have anywhere near as many durability concerns in this mode. As for the opaque parts, I'm glad to say that all the joints are nice and tight, so at least the kibble isn't going anywhere. And it's a good thing too, because this figure has some serious heft for his size. If his joints weren't this stiff, I'm pretty sure he'd collapse under his own weight if you tried to pose him. Not to mention, there's very little visible hollowing. The only spots that don't look solid are his inner thighs, biceps, and the underside of his forearms where the hands store in van mode. Everything else is nice and closed up, so he looks nice and beefy from all sides. And boy can this guy pose. His neck is on a ball joint with a good range of up and down tilt. His shoulders are universal, with an armpit block to keep him looking solid. His biceps rotate on mushroom pegs, his elbows bend to 90 degrees, and his wrists swivel. There is a waist rotation, which just barely clears the tires on his back. The hips are on a universal joint, and the front skirt does lift up for forward kicks. It's all one piece, and it does expose the mushroom pegs when lifted, so it does look a bit awkward. There is a modification that separates the side skirts if you want a cleaner look, but do so at your own risk. Anyway, thighs swivel, knees bend to 90, and the ankles can tilt inward or fold out in their armatures for some forward and back motion. And with how stiff everything is, you can get a lot more poses out of him than most toys. Ironhide only comes with 2 accessories, in the form of twin pistols based on the ones he and Ratchet used in the movie. They're almost entirely covered in silver paint, with only the handles done in bare black plastic. While they're definitely among the smaller weapons Ironhide has used, they look pretty good in his hands, and they're also blast effect compatible. Though you might want to be careful, since his fists are actually painted and the guns can chip that away. But if you don't want him holding both, there are tabs on the back for you to store them. So you can pose him for fisticuffs, or just have him holding one gun like in the movie, without losing any pieces. This is the other reason I like to position the front bumper this way. Most other positions don't leave the clearance to store the guns like this. Alternatively, the tabs from the roof are still exposed on the back of the legs, so you can store the guns there if you'd prefer. Ironhide stands at just over 5.5 inches tall, about half an inch taller than a deluxe car like Earthrise Sunstreaker, and an inch shorter than Siege Optimus. Again, small for a Voyager, but this is pretty close to cartoon scale. Plus, like I said before, he's pretty damn hefty. He may not have the height of a Voyager, but he definitely has the weight of one. Because this is still Studio Series, Ironhide comes with a backdrop depicting the Decepticon shuttle ambush scene from The Transformers the movie. You know, the scene where Ironhide is unceremoniously killed off. Fun times! It's a very faithful recreation of the shuttle interior in the movie, but with a lot of added detail. There's some extra panel lining on the floor and across the control consoles, as well as much more nuanced lighting. The only real inaccuracy I notice are a pair of screens where there should be keypads. I don't know who the artist for this was, but they did a good job. Because Ironhide is so small for a Voyager, he has plenty of room to stand on the base. In fact, you can almost get him into his shooting position from the movie without issue. Or you can pose him getting shot, whatever works. He also fits very nicely in vehicle mode, just in case you want to pretend Ironhide drove around on the shuttle before, you know. As a side note, this toy came out during the time when Hasbro was starting to phase out plastic packaging, so he came on a cardboard tray instead of a plastic blister. But to maintain a uniform aesthetic among Studio Series toys, they printed the backdrop on the cardboard tray. This doesn't really affect the toy, I just found it amusing and wanted to share. I can totally understand why some people are skeptical of this toy. It's small for a Voyager, and the van mode does have its weaknesses. But once you get him in hand, I think most of those issues are going to go away. Not only is this the best looking G1 Ironhide by a wide margin, but he's also one of the most all-around solid figures I've handled in recent years. And above all, he's super fun to mess with, whether I'm transforming him back and forth from van mode, or just messing around with new poses. I would highly recommend this figure to any Generations collector. Just maybe be ready with some stickers for that stripe.